Episode of Armchair Producers. I am one of your hosts, George Terran, alongside the man, the myth, the hypnotoad himself, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
Oh, glory to it. I'm well, thank you.
Excellent.
And not enjoying much longer of our lockdown here in Melbourne to go. Fingers crossed we're into the closing straight of this lockdown.
Yep.
Surely, yeah, number 2.
We've got to round out the trilogy, though. Come on.
That's it. And you know what? And the third one's usually the worst one, isn't it? You can wait for the Matrix revolutions of lockdowns.
Oh no! Don't be so cruel.
The Godfather Part 3 of ISO.
I went back and rewatched that fairly recently, and time has definitely not been kind to that turd.
Revolutions or Godfather 3?
Both, actually. I mean, Matrix Revolutions, not too bad. They made some weird story choices, and they made it about unusual things, and it wasn't particularly thematically engaging. But overall, there's stuff to enjoy. But Godfather Part 3, Sofia Coppola, she's not an actress. She is very talented in directing and writing. She has proven that. And there are so many talented people involved in that movie, but no.
Never seen the third one, actually. I just know it by reputation.
Oh, yes. Do not bother watching it.
Well, yeah, I was thinking to myself tonight, like, I don't know why you have these little conversations with yourself occasionally about what I think the greatest gangster film of all time is. Ooh. And I'm not a particular aficionado of gangster films. I don't particularly like them. I think a lot of the ones that people rave about are a bit crap, like Scarface. Everyone loves Scarface, the Al Pacino film.
Oh yeah,
and I think it's a bit crap personally. I mean, it's quotable, but I've always thought it was just I never particularly enjoyed it that much. So, but anyway, I'm not the best qualified person to answer what the best gangster film of all time is, but I was thinking Goodfellas. You gotta go Goodfellas. Ooh. And that would be I think that's the debate, right? It's Goodfellas or it's The Godfather.
Yeah.
Or Part 2, one of those, a Godfather film. And I think as good as the Godfather is, I always enjoy Goodfellas more.
Goodfellas is just that little bit more kind of just enjoyable in its own right, I think, because there is kind of that tongue-in-cheek humor element to it, even though it is very violent and it's a very violent story. There's still that element of enjoyment to it, whereas The Godfather, it's like it's so slow and meticulous and so well thought out, but it's like listening to Stephen Fry read a history of book to you, where he's got a great interesting voice to listen to for all those hours, and it is an interesting medium that he's discussing, but at the same time it's nice to have a little bit of brevity in there from time to time.
There's a bit of lightness to Goodfellas, it wasn't. I think The Godfather takes itself very, very seriously.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was just a weird little thought I had in my mind, and I guess so. I never loved The Godfather as much as everybody else did. While acknowledging they are wonderful films. So I've never been particularly tempted to go out and run out and watch the third one, which everyone who loves the first two says is average.
Now, speaking of movies that take themselves very seriously, I think we should jump straight into this week's chain movie, which is the 1998 Hugo Weaving starring independent Aussie movie, The Interview.
Yes. Now, this was the last of my 3 chains, and I'm handing the ball over to my lovely co-host, and we're interested to see where he takes us next. But I don't think I can't remember if I've made you watch this film before or not. Is this the first time you've seen it?
It is the first time that I have watched it, and I watched a little clip of it before I watched the movie, and I was very, very interested by it, very intrigued. Not the movie that I thought it was going to be.
Well, tell me what you think about it, because this is probably I used to own this on DVD. I've seen this many, many, many times, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about it.
So this is the look, the feel, the audio, the production, and everything about this movie. It's very much of a time. There was a little run of movies there that kind of really brought Australian independent cinema big elsewhere in the world. Like, but when this was released, I was still very much back in the UK. But even this and Romper Stomper and Chopper, as well as The Castle and Bad Boy Bobby. There was like
I think there was another thread there as well. But you're right. That's one thread of Australian independent film. The other thread was the what do we call it? It's completely just the Strictly Ballroom Baz Luhrmann, Stephen Elliott sort of thread, which was that was sort of far more quirky Australia,
definitely.
Whatever I can't believe I can't remember the name of it, but the drag queens, Queen of the, So I mean, these are the other thread of a story. You're right, but your one thread was this very dark, gritty sort of
very much taking itself seriously. The way that the interview opens up, it's I imagine that if they were to do a remake of this movie, it would be sort of like a director's wet dream for someone like one of those really gritty independent directors that wants to tell something compelling, because there's a lot going on in this movie. And for those who don't know, the interview follows the arrest and interview and developments through that interview of Hugo Weaving's character in relation to what starts off, it seems to be just about a stolen car. But you very quickly, and just from the way that the police officers are interviewing him and the sequences outside of the interview room, you very much get the idea, no, this isn't just about a stolen car. There's more to it. And the story slowly but surely drip feeds you little bits, little morsels of information. And the sort of like the character that Hugo Weaving plays, he goes from, the first time you meet him, he's asleep in an armchair in this kind of very rough and tumble looking little hole.
I think the British might call it a bedsit.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's like a one bedroom, all encompassing room that's living room, bedroom, kitchen, everything just there, and it's not very big. It's not attractive. It's not nice looking. He looks tired. Hugo Weaving has got a very unique facial structure anyway, and it's funny seeing him with like the longer floppy hair compared to last week's Agent Smith, where it's so prim and perfectly shaved and tidied and everything. The way that the police kind of raid his place and slap him about and treat him, you do instantly kind of feel like, what? This guy, maybe he is a bit weird, but I think he's innocent. And the story just progresses, and the character work on Hugo Weaving's side, on the lead sergeant's side, every actor involved is really great, and it's eked out so well, and it layers on this interesting notion of how far is too far to go when you know someone is guilty, which is always like one of those things that even in Insomnia, and particularly referenced in the Chris Nolan version of it, where Al Pacino's character is under investigation by Internal Affairs because he planted evidence, and he's saying he did it because he knew that this guy was guilty and he wanted to guarantee that this guy was put away. And it's like, okay, what's the greater good here? And this movie plays with that idea very, very well, but it also plays almost coming into a little bit of the Usual Suspects kind of side, where that's one of possibly the most famous interview of a bad guy movies, I guess, and the twists and turns of that dynamic between the interviewer and the interviewee. This does it in a far more dramatic way that isn't kind of seeding itself into, we're going to keep on cutting back to these cool little action sequences and stuff like that.
There's no twist. Well, there's a twist. There's kind of a twist, I guess, but like it's potentially not as hyper stylized as something like The Usual
Yeah,
Suspects.
definitely. This is definitely cutting it closer to the reality bone versus the Hollywoodized ideology.
People, long-term listeners will know I'm a fan of. Someone says, "Wait, what are you drinking?"
Oh, Guinness.
Guinness,
Yes.
drink of champions. It's a meal in a glass, so we're open to sponsorship from Guinness. I'm happy to take several kegs.
Yes, please.
So I was going to say, people, regular listeners will know I'm a big fan of dialogue-driven films. Hence my Tarantino fanboy hat, family on. But I love nothing more than a film can keep me utterly riveted simply through the act of two people sitting in a room talking.
Yes.
So I think of a film like Locke, starring Tom Hardy, which is a massively underrated one of his films. If you haven't seen Locke, go out and get it. It's Tom Hardy in a car talking on the phone for 2 hours, and it's utterly compelling. So this isn't quite that constrained. We've got a few different locations here, but essentially the meat of it is a duel of wits between Hugo Weaving's character, Mr. Eddie Fisher, and Detective Steele, played by Tony Martin, and he's, to a lesser degree, he's Offsider. And you know what I enjoy about this, and I enjoy seeing a wonderful actor doing some of their best work, and I think this is some of Hugo's best work. In that he starts out, as you sort of say, they raid his apartment, or for want of a better term, his bedsit, his hovel at the start of a film, and he's an utterly pathetic character.
Yeah.
Completely pathetic. He's crying, he's wet himself, he's apologizing, he's terrified.
Yeah.
Seemingly. By the end of the film, but the final shot of this film, which is apparently there is an alternate ending you can get in some places, but the final ending of the standard version of a film is, I won't reveal what happens, but you see he has come 180 degrees. He has gone on a journey. The character, the Mr. Fisher we see at the end of the story is miles away from the one he started on, and you were on board for the whole ride, and you know exactly how he got there. That's what I always felt was so brilliant about this film, was just Hugo Weaving at his absolute best, and Tony Martin, the Detective Steele, who for most Australians, I imagine, I always think of him as he's probably his best known role was as a reverend on a soap opera on Channel 10 in the 90s called E Street. I don't know if that one ever made its way over to the UK, because they do love Australian dramas.
Yeah, I don't think that one came over. But,
he was also on Heartbreak High, so he was on TV guy, right?
That would be where I know him from, Heartbreak High.
So to see him, and when I watch this, every time I think to myself is, why didn't he have it? Well, hasn't he had? He's still alive. Why hasn't he had a bigger film career? Because I don't know what the sequence of events was, but this was made about a year before Hugo Weaving really became a huge star, which obviously he was in The Matrix, then he was in Lord of the Rings, he was in fucking Transformers, he was in Marvel.
He's in everything.
He's a big star. And I think Tony Martin kept up with him step for step in the acting stakes here. I mean, I thought I'd known a few police people in my time, but I think he absolutely channeled what I would expect a hard-bitten, no-nonsense police detective to actually be like. And unfortunately to him, I mean, I don't know what actually happened, but he's never really done a whole lot of cinema.
One thing that did kind of distract me a little bit with his performance was just his accent is really strong. It's very, very rich, and he talks through his teeth and through his nose a lot. So I wonder if that's just the way that he talks, and he's not been able to kind of shed that like so many other Australian actors have.
It's true, yeah. I mean, even in the Australian cinema, we haven't seen a whole lot of him doing big Australian cinema either, where the accent will be less of a problem. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's the accent. Maybe he didn't want to go work overseas. You're right, Hugo. We talked last week about his weird mid-Atlantic accent that he did for Agent Smith, and he's got a wonderful voice as well as a very unusual looking face. And he's very talented. One thing that always stood out to me about this film is the look. you described it as kind of in that oeuvre of Bad Boy Bubby and Chopper and Robert Stomper. It is gritty, but this is a slightly more stylized view of a world than something like Chopper or your Robert Stomper, which goes for pure realism.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But this one actually kind of has a very sort of film noir type vibe to me. What do you think?
I absolutely agree with that. The camera shots, the fact that you keep on getting these shots of the video camera behind the hidden wall and things like that. There's always like this second or third layer of story going on. That's so film noirish, and it's almost like an unusual mystery. The whole thing. It's not just a detective story. It's not a film noir. It is a mystery novel that you just witness these characters slowly but surely interweaving or coming together and separating at unusual points and things. It's whoever. I'm going to look it up now because I want to see who the DOP was, because it did a really, really good job. Especially, none of the sets look like, oh, they invested a lot of money in this, and the costuming is so simple but very effective, and it draws on the period that they're talking about. But it all feeds into giving it the production a cohesive feel. Simon Duggan is the guy who did it, and he's gone on to do some big stuff. Like he was the cinematographer on The Great Gatsby, on Hacksaw Ridge, I, Robot, Knowing, Warcraft 300, Killer Elite. He's done a lot of stuff. So,
a lot of his stuff's been made in and around Australia, so that's probably not surprising. But it's he's actually directed a film too, which was a short film directed by a guy named Craig Monahan, who I have to say I've never heard of, and disappointingly hasn't really done a whole lot. He's done 2 films since. Peaches in 2004 and Healing in 2011, both of which I think are Hugo Weaving films, if I'm not mistaken.
Peaches is, yes.
And so is Healing. 2014, sorry, Healing. I'd never heard of either of these films, despite the fact they're obviously Australian films. Hugo's name's probably what got them made. But I think it's a bit of a shame, because I think he showed some real skill here, the director. And as you sort of said, the DOP's got something to answer for there, but I think the look of this film kind of has a vaguely 1940s feel.
Yeah.
And it has also, I mean, the story itself, as we sort of said, it's kind of a mystery, it's kind of a battle of wills, but at the same time, it kind of has a Kafka-esque element to it. It's the start as well, where, you know, the old lady in the boarding house or apartment building, or what do you want to call it, says, they're taking Mr. Fisher away. And, you know, sort of early on, you kind of get this whole, as you sort of said, you start out going, this guy is pathetic. You know, it's got to be a case of persecution by these thug cops. But obviously that story, that sort of element changes over time as the story tends to develop. But Craig Monahan also co-wrote the script, along with a guy named Gordon Davey, who I never heard of as well, and this is the only thing he's ever written. That would be why. But it's always disappointing to see people who do such good work, and I think that's maybe a symptom of the Australian film industry not being what the American film market is. That you probably have limited opportunities to do anything with making your films, no matter how talented you are, unless you're prepared to go work overseas or something.
Yeah. I find it really interesting thinking about so many Australian independent movies are kind of cult classics, so many of them, and so many actors, especially ones that make it big in Hollywood, are kind of born and raised in Australia, and yet there still seems to be an odd kind of gap between the Australian cinema and the rest of the world. It seems to be like they grow them big and strong here, and that talent, whether it's the actors, whether it's the production companies and the DOPs and everything else, and so much stuff is filmed here. For some reason, it doesn't seem to just quite take off and hit those highlights of, like, back in the 90s, early 2000s, Film 4 in the UK, they were pumping out some real quality pieces, and people were kind of saying, oh, is it going to be able to become like the next Hollywood? And they ended up reaching too far, and they started making some trash. But nowhere seems to have got that showbiz glamour of Hollywood. The French like to believe that they have with the French cinema, and in France, nothing beats French cinema, but it's a rare bird that comes out of French cinema and takes over the world. There's more chance of something from Japan or China making it big compared to a French movie or a German movie, a European movie.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I can't. I mean, there are certainly French films. I mean, I can't think of any for a while because there hasn't been any films I've seen for a while. But I can't think of ever going to see a Chinese film made for China at the cinema in Australia. I can't think of ever getting a Japanese, other than manga, and especially anime films, like the famous ones, which is your mate Miyazaki. Those are the kind of films that get a release at art house cinemas here. Aside from that, you get the odd Japanese one here and there, but I would say it would at least be on a par. You'd be as many French films as Japanese films, at least here.
Well, maybe at the moment the taste is more kind of Japanese and things, particularly after the success of things like Hero, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and that kind of thing. And Ip Man is they've done their fourth and final movie, and each one of them has been a global box office success. Whereas the French kind of thing of, you think about Amélie and Delicatessen and those kinds of movies, they were sort of like the 80s, 90s, just cresting on to the early 2000s. Maybe the kind of the flavors have changed somewhat. I think that we are going to start seeing a lot more of that Chinese cinema coming in, because so many Hollywood movies and things are being made in China because of Chinese backers, like Tencent. They are producing so many goddamn movies and games. And
I would say, though, that Chinese market, at least for now, as far as I can tell, mark film, and well, they should, because they've got 1 billion plus people there to sell them to.
True.
Make films for the Chinese market. I don't recall too many Chinese films. Like, if you want to go see an actual mainland Chinese film, I'm not talking about Hong Kong cinema, by the way. Actual mainland Chinese film. Yeah, there's a special cinema in the city you got to go to do it, I think. And so you may play your that's probably where you go for most of your Hong Kong stuff, but it doesn't make the art house or the multiplex.
That's fair. Yeah. But let's bring it back to the interview, because we diverted enough, and we're a professional podcasting service that does not deviate from the plan. I was really impressed with this. I kept trying to work out throughout the whole thing what's the situation, what the story was, and it kept me guessing right up until the end. I wasn't sure if this was kind of a long con from Hugo Weaving's character, where he was trying to oust the lead detective, the sergeant, for his repeatedly mentioned aggressive behavior and attitudes and bullying and inappropriate style. I wondered if he was actually somehow connected to someone that had been previously victimized by this cop, and this was his way of kind of getting him ousted or something like that. I didn't know if it was literally a situation of, Hugo Weaving is the bad guy, and it kept me guessing throughout the whole thing, which, as you have said, it's rare that a movie does that. So I was really impressed with that, and that was purely on the competency of the storytelling. It was really, really.
There's nothing else to it, right? It's the story laid bare. Like, if they can't tell us, if the actors can't convince you, and the story isn't interesting enough, there's no explosions. There's no transforming robots in the background to distract you. It's all the story and the acting. That's why I think I enjoy these films. I get so impressed when someone does it properly.
Absolutely agree. No, this is a great movie. Really, really great movie. I feel like we probably are going to be getting some form of remake of it because it can be done on a relatively cheap budget. You get an actor that has had a lot of kind of social media faux pas-ness or something like that, get them sort of like, yeah, this is a real good opportunity to show off your acting chops, get them involved, maybe put a gender swap into it as well if you wanted to, and you could have a nice sleeper hit. This like a remake of this coming up on one of the streaming services. I can fully believe that.
Who would you, if you had a choice in the matter, if I gave you $15 million to do a remake, who would you go talk to first to play Hugo's character?
Ooh. You know what? I would actually the first two cast member voices that popped into my mind for the Hugo Weaving part, though he hasn't proven to be particularly great at it, and he's definitely got more of the comedy chops. I would be interested to see Chris Hemsworth. I think that he's got that likable look and personality that he could, if he played it right, if he acted well enough, the twists of the character throughout the interview would be great. Similarly, in the Sergeant's perspective, Cate Blanchett.
Kate would be amazing because Kate could play a rock. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know about Chris, though. I don't know if he could pull off. Well, I think what, for me, was so effective about this film was that, like I said earlier, you completely bought how pathetic he was at the start.
Yeah.
He was such a pathetic character at the beginning, disheveled. You see the chair he was sleeping in?
Yeah.
Look at that. It's worn and it's old and it's falling apart. It's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could buy Chris Hemsworth with that body and that face ever looking that pathetic.
That's true.
But that's it. I've doubted it before. If you're talking about disgraced actors and people who are looking to make a comeback,
yeah,
Kevin Spacey hasn't been convicted of anything.
Oh, wouldn't this be kind of potentially going a little close to his
Usual Suspects? But what if he was playing the police sergeant?
Ooh. Now that would be interesting. So who would you have in the Hugo Weaving role?
Well, that's a good question. I hadn't thought that far ahead. But
what?
The first point that pops into mind is the show's favorite actor, Sam Rockwell.
That would be phenomenal, of course. They even though it was very disjointed conversation, they've worked together in the past in Moon.
That wasn't deliberate. I just thought about it. I'm like, who do I think of who can play disheveled and pathetic, but at the same time could turn it around to become quite menacing at the end? And I think Sam Rockwell could do that.
Okay, here's my other choice: Cate Blanchett and Tilda Swinton.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
Either of them playing either of those roles.
I must say, seeing it, I've seen this now many, many times. It's probably the first time in many years I've watched it. I did notice a few cracks pop in this time, so I don't want it to be a complete love fest. There are some cracks in the facade of this film, and I'd be interested to see your perspective as well. The first thing that sort of popped into my head as I was watching it is that, I guess this is a question rather than an observation. Do you think they were looking for a serial killer from the start, or was this an accidental stumbling over something that was a little bit more than they thought they were getting?
I think that they were looking for a killer, not necessarily a serial killer. And I think that they, even until about 45 minutes into the movie, I don't think that they were entirely sold on the idea that they got the right guy.
I've always kind of assumed, and maybe this is me being just not thinking hard enough about it, but I always took it the other way. I always felt that they did pick up Hugo for a stolen car and got more than they bargained for. But either way, I felt like the raid at the start of a film made no sense. Like, he's a guy in a bedsit, and especially if you think he's being arrested about a stolen car.
Yeah.
you're not going to bust in with guns out, shouting at him and pointing your shotgun at his head for a stolen car. That's a little bit overkill. We've been joined by our regular third co-host, Archimedes.
Yep.
Just decided to step into the room and give us his thoughts. So yeah, I always kind of going, well, really, I mean, it seems like a lot of force and for a stolen car, and then the way that they toss the room immediately afterwards, kind of just, what are you exactly looking for? What do you expect? What do you like when Tony Martin's turning the bed upside down and flipping through piles of paper? What exactly does he think he's going to find? He's going to go, aha! It was, Hugo Weaving with the candlestick in the conservatory. It's, I never quite looking at it going, what exactly are you looking to find by throwing things around like that? And but they bagged everything up and took it to the police station. It just didn't make a lot of sense as to what exactly they were doing with it. In the end, there is an important plot point that does sort of loop back around and make sense of why they did it. But from the logic of a story, it's really it didn't make a lot of sense to me. There's also a sequence partway through the film, so slight spoilers here. So it's a 22-year-old film. I think we can get away with it. Where Hugo sort of has a dream sequence where he sees all his victims and stuff like that. Yeah. And I know he's actually kind of describing it, but that didn't work for me.
Yeah, me neither. I don't think that they needed to show that, and the CGI of Hugo kind of walking out of the burning building as well, it very much showed the budget, and as the years go on, it shows the age of the movie as well.
I don't think it needed to be there.
Yeah, I think that if it had just been kind of just on Hugo's face as he was just talking it through, Hugo is definitely strong enough to be able to command the screen for that long of a time talking about something like that. And you not need those visual aids beyond the acting that he delivers. It was unnecessary.
I'm being a bit hypercritical here because I'm with you. I think this is one of the finest Australian films of the last 30 years. And it is available to rent on YouTube, I believe.
Yes.
So it is in Australia at least. So I can't speak for foreign markets. I'm sorry, but if you do the search, do not get it mixed up with the Seth Rogen film that kind of pissed off the North Korean government and got released for free. It's not 2098 Australian film, the interview, and I think it's well worth exploring if you are a fan of. I mean, I don't know if Hugo Weaving has fans, but if you're you've seen Hugo and stuff before, and you're like, I'd be curious to see some of his work in Australia. Yeah. I can recommend this, and I can recommend Proof from 1991, which we haven't reviewed, but I think this is just. I think it's a shame, though, in a way that he's never really got a chance to stretch his wings and show exactly what he's capable of in a Hollywood role. Yeah, like a role, he could play a Kaiser Soze in a Usual Suspects like that. But he's never had that chance. He's always behind makeup or a mask or I'm sure his bank balance is okay with that. But it would have been nice. It would still be nice because the guy's still alive. It would be nice to see him one day have a role that he can really sink his teeth into. And here's one for left field that just popped into my head. Could he play Lex Luthor?
That would definitely be interesting. He could do it for sure. Okay, so let's just hypothetical this out then. If he was the Lex Luthor, who would you get to be the Superman to his Lex Luthor?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Superman doesn't matter. It's like Batman. Who's playing Batman matters very little. It's all about how interesting the villains are. Superman's boring. I don't necessarily have a problem with Henry Cavill in the role. I think Henry Cavill's fine as Superman. He looks the part. He's got a great physique. His head he looks like a Superman, right? I'm still I'm fine. I was fine with Brandon Routh. I know. Again, there's actually a Joe Blow video this week, an episode of Unpopular Opinion.
It's really nice to know that they listen to the show.
And they did an episode on Superman Returns. Is the Unpopular Opinion this week? Is they're selling it one of the better Superman films. And I have said many times on record, despite the fact that it's unpopular with a lot of people, I liked it, and I like Brandon Routh for Superman because he kind of is Christopher Reeve, and I liked that. But essentially, if you can get the right villains in place, as long as your Superman is passable, it doesn't really matter who your Superman is. I don't care. He's not quite as bad as Batman because Batman's under a mask a lot of the time, I guess. But Superman, whatever. Get yourself an interesting villain. Christopher Reeve wasn't an amazing actor. Gene Hackman was a great Lex Luthor.
Oh, Christopher Reeve was a good actor. If you watch Somewhere in Time when he plays against Jane Austen, not Jane Austen, Jane Seymour.
I haven't. I've only seen that. And I think I saw him in The City of Lost Children. But anyway. I think it'd be fun to see him under a ball cap and really hamming it up.
Well, I think that Hugo Weaving is definitely a contender for a potential Lex Luthor, but the other one who is an obvious choice for Lex Luthor is Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, that could work, but you have to try and turn the comedy down about 10%.
Yeah. But taking a sideways little thing, that did remind me, speaking of superheroes and supervillains, I think we should actually just touch a little bit on the passing of Chadwick Boseman.
That was a shock.
Yeah. I don't think anyone knew that he was
I didn't know he was sick
from cancer, and especially, he'd been suffering from it for 4 years, so he did all of Black Panther, all of the Marvel stuff that he did, as well as a number of his very important kind of black biography movies, I guess you'd call them, during this period. So maybe he's had a surprisingly short career, but he did a lot with the time that he had, for sure. And it's a big shame because he was a talented man, very talented.
Very, yeah. I mean, he really nailed the role of Black Panther. Which, is going to be his most memorable role. I mean, like you said, he was in 42, which is a Jackie Robinson movie, and I think he did a few other movies about the civil rights movement type thing. Yeah. Probably before he really became a really big name. Oh my goodness, he was in Gods of Egypt. I'll forgive him for that.
Yeah, he was.
And I think he was in just earlier this year. He was in a Spike Lee movie. And what a shock! I mean, because he was only 42. Yeah, and you sort of said last year he was. I mean, I don't know when he actually shot his Endgame stuff, but he was in Endgame last year in a smallish role. But goodness, it was very sad. I mean, a talented dude, and it goes to show that cancer can strike you anywhere. It doesn't matter how rich and famous you are. Yeah, I mean, it's a crass thought, but everyone's had it. What do I do with Black Panther from here?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, one of the things that Shay was talking about was maybe this is an opportunity for them to kind of slightly course correct and get Shuri as the new Black Panther. And
I mean, she's the Black Panther in the comic books, I understand.
That's my understanding. She was very popular, and it would be very kind of. I feel like that's probably an easy-ish way of kind of continuing the legacy on, of actually recognizing T'Challa's death, maybe even in canon, and just going, she has taken up the mantle and continues on with it, which, she was phenomenal in Black Panther. And
she had much to do. But and that would be in line with their kind of philosophy. They really do kind of want to make more female superhero films. Yeah. Because I've been talking to people about this. I was talking to someone about this last weekend. People have always wanted female superhero films. They just want good ones. Yeah. They don't want fucking Elektra and Catwoman. If you make shit films with female leads, of course you're going to go, well, no one saw it. Yeah. And this is the same thing with before Black Panther. People were like, oh, I don't want a black superhero. Sure they do. They just want a good one. They don't want they don't want Steel. I saw Steel. It wasn't good. So I think that's the first place my head went. And I know it's a crass thing to talk about only a week after the man died, but like I said, I think everyone had the same thought. What do I do with that? Because I made all the monies. First one. I had people sort of saying, can they retcon it and maybe have Michael B. Jordan step into the role? I don't think that's going to work. But I mean, the logical choice is to go Shuri. And mean, it's a hell of a step up for the young lady. I mean, I forget the actress's name, but you're right. She was wonderful in the short amount of time she had in Black Panther. But it's canonical with the comic books as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
And it's Letitia Wright.
Yes,
Letitia. I think it's Letitia Wright. And goodness, what a huge step up in role that would be for her. It'd be a ballsy decision by Marvel if they go that way. But and I think they have to do something though, even though I'm sure the temptation would be there to potentially retire the character for a while. But
they were already in pre-production for a sequel, so that's obviously going to be stopped because whatever pre-production they had, that was with the idea that Chadwick Boseman was going to be there, unless Chadwick had been very open with Marvel and had been discussing it with them, saying, hey, it's getting worse. I've only got so much time. Reduce my time down. Make Black Panther 2 a changeover of the Mantle movie kind of thing, perhaps. Who knows?
The IMDb page has no cast listed at all at the moment, and says it's announced rather than in pre-production.
Yeah. So
the rumors here do say that apparently there's a trivia item that says it's rumored Michael B. Jordan will return to play Killmonger for this movie, and Kraven the Hunter might be the bad guy. But if they were lining up to have Michael B. Jordan come back, then that would be interesting. That would be tempting, I'm sure, for them to maybe have him step in.
I think considering how successful he was in that role and the movie on the whole, because, I mean, aside from Avengers Endgame, the Black Panther was like the most kind of Oscar-worthy movie that Marvel have made thus far. So they want that Oscar gold. They want to be able to hang that on the Marvel brand. And Michael B. Jordan has proven success as a quality actor as well as an action character. However, kind of going off topic of Chadwick Boseman, if they were to bring back another fucking villain again, my God, that basically means that no death is sacred in the MCU because it happens so fucking often. Loki has died innumerable times. Every bloody character has died. The only character that at the moment is definitely dead is Black Widow.
And Thanos.
Yeah, he'll probably be back.
Well, isn't that the comic books, though? Doesn't it happen in comic books all the time anyway?
Exactly, but if they're gonna kill someone, make it, don't make it so obvious. So that was my biggest problem with part one of the Infinity War duology, I guess, is like, really? They're going to kill off all of their new superhero characters? No, none of those had emotional value to me. But, it still didn't make it a terrible movie. It still didn't make Endgame any more rewarding when you see them all come back, blah, 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 blah. But, if there's going to be a death, make it poignant, because usually in Marvel and DC, when a hero or a villain dies, it's a poignant moment. Let it be a poignant moment. That's all I say. If a character's going to die, don't bring them back in the next goddamn movie.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's just tempting when you have someone who's so successful as
that's true.
Michael B. Jordan was to go, well, it seems a waste. I mean, to have thrown him away like that when you could have had an arc. That's why. I mean, that's why I'm quite if you go back to Superman films, like Lex Luthor, Superman didn't kill Lex Luthor at the end of Superman 1 or in Superman 2. He just hauled him off to jail. And, I mean, I know when I was young, I used to love Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. I thought he was wonderful. And you could have an arc of stories about, your superhero and their supervillain facing off. You didn't need a different villain every film.
Yeah.
It seems to be an idea that's kind of gone out of fashion now.
Yeah.
Right? You got to kill the villain at the end of a film, and then you'll have the next one, and the next. Well, can't we have that was what was interesting about the last two Avengers films. We had a short arc, or longer if you consider that Thanos kind of had been fucking around for a while. But we had the one villain in two separate films, and that gave us a lot more space to hear the story about them. But
yeah.
But to come back to the original point, very sad at the
Mm.
year he passed away. 1 year older than me, and really, he'll be missed.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just trying to enjoy his shit.
Yeah, I mean, he was a quality actor, and it really shows the effect that he had on the community in Hollywood and the fans worldwide. When that day, almost straight away, every single thing on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook was about Chadwick Boseman, and it was hundreds of different stories about how he helped people and how he did all these things, and people coming forwards with these wonderful stories about him as a person, and particularly how he was trying to help make it better for other people coming up after him. And I think that's a real testament to a truly genuine, honest, great quality character of a man. So
I'd like to think I'd like to be that kind of guy. If I'd made it, and was making $20 million a picture, man. I think it was talked about like buying out cinemas, like paying for cinemas,
yeah,
to go in disadvantaged neighborhoods to go and see his films.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's cool shit, right? It's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Now, back on track. Obviously, The Interview was the last of Travis's 3 movies to get him to get me to watch The Interview, and that was a delight. Thank you very much. Now it is my turn for 3 movies. So I have got an end location in mind within 3 movies. I managed to do it. We are following Paul Sonkiller, who played Detective Inspector Jackson in the movie. He was in Gallipoli. So quite a classic.
Indeed, a very fine Australian film.
Yeah, a classic Peter Weir movie with a very young Mel Gibson, and I think we've watched it in the past already, but we do what we must to get where we need to be.
Any film again? This is an Australian classic. This is Peter Weir, written by. If we had a poet laureate, it would probably be David Williamson.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, so I'm happy to go back to this movie because it is a quality movie, and they keep on coming back to the story of Gallipoli. I think it was last year or the year before. One of the big networks in Australia made a 4-part miniseries all about Gallipoli, but it was far more of a kind of a romantic thing from the look of the trailers. Whereas this is definitely more of a drama focused on the ravages of war.
This is almost the founding myth of Australia. I mean, if we have our Russian bots who are listening,
we've got Canadian bots at the moment.
Canadian bots. So our bot friends who are listening, you can't. I mean, I've said before, you cannot understand Australia without understanding what happened at Gallipoli. So it's a century. This is like the fucking American Revolution for Yanks. This is like what Gallipoli is for Australians. It's such an important part of the Australian story. And I think, for me, this is the best film I've seen made about it. And Peter Weir, highly competent director, the kind of guy, who worked in Hollywood. And
absolutely,
as you say, it's interesting to see young Mel Gibson on his way up. And I can't tell you how many times. And I think I said it at the time when 1917 came out. This year, 1917. The one shot World War I film. I'm like, well, I liked that film better when it was called Gallipoli. And 1917 was fine, but it did kind of rip off Gallipoli a little bit for me.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
There we go. That's something exciting for this week.
So that is next week's movie chain session, and then you'll be pleased to know that we have got nothing but quality for the next 3 movies.
We are going to have to punish ourselves after that, though, right?
We are, and I actually, if you want me to choose the follow-up punishment movie, I already know where we could go, and it leads to many, many places.
Well, we'll wait and see where that takes us. I suspect that's not a bad idea.
All right, so Travis, I want you to take me to Lovecraft Country, please. Tell me about it.
So Lovecraft Country is a new series which has premiered in the last few weeks in Australia on Foxtel or Binge if you have that app. I believe it's an HBO production. So if you're in the States, you're probably watching it on HBO if you've got that on cable or HBO Max for streaming. And the synopsis says, a young African-American travels across the US in the 1950s in search of his missing father. Don't think that really does it justice. Now, are you familiar with the writings of H.P. Lovecraft?
I haven't read any of them, but I do know a fair amount. Obviously, the most famous of H.P. Lovecraft's characters, Cthulhu.
Cthulhu. So H.P. Lovecraft, I guess you'd classify him as a horror writer. I actually don't know anything about his work at all. I've never read any of it. I assume he wrote in the early 20th century or something like that. But you're right. Cthulhu has kind of become a very famous character in its own right, despite the fact I can't recall there ever being a film or anything like that being made based on the character Cthulhu. So anyway, the writings of H.P. Lovecraft are the Lovecraft part of Lovecraft Country. So yes, part of the story is about the journey of Atticus Freeman, played by Jonathan Majors, his journey across the US in the 1950s to try and find his father who has disappeared. But the characters, or I guess the aesthetic of H.P. Lovecraft's characters do play into the mix as well.
Okay.
So we start out with our central character of Atticus on a bus in the South next to another African-American woman talking about his experiences as a soldier. Then the bus breaks down and a truck turns up to take all the passengers through to the next town. But you can just see the look on his face when he sees the truck turn up as Atticus turns around, goes to the luggage compartment of the bus, takes his bag and just starts walking. It's just like, I know I'm not getting on that truck. Not next to the white folk. And so the segregation is almost a character in this film of itself. It's a central, running theme throughout the show. I just take a step back. If the TV show actually, before him being on the bus, opens with him imagining the world of H.P. Lovecraft with like the walkers from H.G. Wells, Cthulhu, and UFOs and crazy shit going on. You're like, what the fuck is going on? But I think that's actually a vision into Atticus's wonderful imagination. So he is a reader. And again, the books he reads sort of tend to come up quite a bit in the show. The first episode is absolutely fucking brilliant. Like it is tense, it is scary, it is violent and gruesome, and so much fun at parts, which is actually kind of a very strange mix for a show. It has a very heavy theme of segregation and white terrorism of African American people.
Yeah,
there can actually be some amusement in there and enjoyment as well. He's on his bus. He's just got out of the army. He journeys his way back to Chicago, where he meets up and stays with his uncle, played by what's his name? He's Courtney B. Vance, who was in Law and Order. He played a lawyer in Law and Order for many years.
Okay,
that's where I remember him from. And he decided from when he gets there, because he's gone back to Chicago because he got a letter from his father saying, "I need you to come join me. I've discovered something about our past, and you've got some sort of secret family history I need to tell you about." But when he gets there, his father's gone. So Courtney Vance, actually, one of his jobs is to write guides for African-American travelers. A little bit like the Green Book in Green Book, if you ever saw that one with Mahershala Ali and
Viggo
Mortensen. So he decides, well, apparently they discover figure out where he might be up in Massachusetts. So they're like, okay, well, we're going to go and drive up there and see if we can find him. And he sort of combines it as an opportunity to take some notes for his book about, how safe travels for the African-American person. And along with him comes his cousin, I think, Letitia Lewis. And the first episode, as I said, is a riot. Once they leave Chicago, you can sort of feel them when they're out in the country. The complete sense of menace. When every town they go to, they chase. They try to have something to eat in a cafe and end up being chased out of town by rednecks shooting at them from the back of a pickup truck. They stopped in a forest to try and see if they can figure out where his father might have gone, only to be completely terrorized by a police officer who's basically threatens them that if they don't get out of town by sundown, the county by sundown, they'll be hung. Given they've got 7 minutes until sundown, that's quite a tense moment. So I'm not going to spoil it from there because that actually that particular sequence sets off an incredible showdown, an incredibly tense scene, which really takes the show off in a very left-wing sort of direction. In the one hand, you're thinking, is this going to be a straight drama about segregation in the 50s and this guy's journey to sort of find his father and survive, being an African-American man in a hostile country? Yeah, that's part of a story. But my goodness, it goes some places you do not expect after that. And maybe I'm giving a little bit too much away, but that's where the Lovecraft part comes in. And you're like, I remember it sort of took a breath after it was a 70-minute pilot. You're like, wow, I don't think I've been that impressed by a first episode of a show for a very, 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 very long time. I was like, when I was so excited that there was a second episode sitting there waiting for me to consume. And that's where the trouble started.
Because this has got one hell of a legacy of creators, Jordan Peele, J.J. Abrams, and Misha Green, who did a really cool but short-lived and kind of went too far, Helix, which is a great sci-fi series. But this has got a bit of a...
Also, Sons of Anarchy and Heroes in there as well for Misha Green. So that's you're right. They've got quite a bit of heritage there. Unfortunately, though, Jordan Peele also was responsible for the reboot of Twilight Zone that came out, I think, last year. And that was pretty bad.
Because you watched quite a bit of that, didn't you?
I liked the idea of a Twilight Zone. It used to be one of my favorite shows when I was a kid, and I was excited that they were going to do it again. And that's what it wasn't up to scratch, wasn't up to snuff. Unfortunately, the second episode of Lovecraft Country, we went from one of the best episodes of TV I've seen in a very long time to one of the worst. The second episode is a complete and utter mess. The main sort of the idea of our group of heroes sort of being on a road trip or a journey, and it goes from being kind of a road film to them being stuck in one spot, and I won't sort of say why. They're stuck in this mansion with a bunch of people who are doing something that's very difficult to understand. There's magic involved, okay? So spoilers, there's magic involved. And, so to take a step back, these people, this is hinted at in the first episode. Stuff that happens, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're like, that's interesting. And I was sort of expecting that payoff to sort of draw that payout off of a few episodes of like, what is going on with these people when these unexplained things happen? And they smash us in the face of it in the second episode, and it's all over the shop. And it's incredibly frustrating because I'm watching, and I had a lot of trouble following what the fuck was supposed to be going on, what people's motivations were, why they were doing things, how things were happening, who all random people with sort of characters would appear, and you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? And it was, I was extraordinarily disappointed in episode 2 of Lovecraft Country. And if you actually have a look at the reviews of people who have watched the 2 episodes, there's 3 out now. The first episode is got an 8.5. The second drops to a 7.2. And I am astounded at how generous that is because it is a mess. A mess. I'm going to go back for episode 3 because because of the first one. Because the first one was so good, I'm going to give it one more chance. But if it's anything like, if they don't clean up a lot of the mess that they made in the second episode, then I'm going to be unhappy. A sternly worded letter. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of Jordan Peele's jam, though. I mean, he comes up with a cool idea. Let's reboot the Twilight Zone, and let's come up with a cool idea for a story. And I don't know what to do with it though.
Yeah,
which is also, for the record, fucking J.J. Abrams' MO.
True.
Wouldn't it be cool if a plane crash on a mystery island? Cool. And there's also some mysterious shit happening on the island. Cool.
What happens next?
Hire somebody else to do the end. Yeah, there's a man who can't end the story. Is J.J. Abrams, and
Yeah.
It was so. I will see how we go with one more, but I'm just telling people. You're going to see episode 1. You're set expectations to high.
Mm-hmm.
Do try to temper that if you can, because my goodness, the second episode was such a disappointment.
Okay. Incidentally, if you are interested in arguably the best non-Lovecraftian movie that is very much a love letter to Lovecraft, In the Mouth of Madness with Sam Neill.
I am familiar with it. I've never seen it though.
Yeah. It's one of my faves. It's not a fantastic movie, but it's so of its time. It's wonderful. Sam Neill is great, and what's the fucking guy's name? He played Lionel Luthor in Smallville. He's a face that you look at and go, oh, I know him. There's actually a few of those in it.
Jürgen Prochnow?
Huh?
Jürgen Prochnow?
No.
I've never watched an episode of Smallville in my life. I have taste.
Unbelievable. He was also in Gremlins 2, I think it was.
I'm also not a 15-year-old girl. Who does he play in his...
John Glover. That's his name. Okay. John Glover. Yeah, and he was the other exec that was kind of chasing after Bill Murray's character in Scrooged.
It's been a long time since I've seen Scrooged, but yeah, okay. Don't recognize him.
Well, I'm
looking at one picture though, right? Like he's probably a lot older than he was back then.
Yeah, but that's kind of the closest that. Because the one of the dream projects that Guillermo del Toro wants is At the Mountains of Madness, which is the Lovecraft novel, and he's kind of.
I wonder why none of it's actually ever been adapted.
I think part of it is that there's some issues similar to some of the other estates of famous writers. They're very particular about who's going to take control of it, and there was a period where Guillermo was going to make At the Mountains of Madness, but then there was a movie that came out, and I can't remember what one it was now that he said, but it came out, and Guillermo went, "Well, there's no point in making In the Mountains of Madness." So I guess that's part of it.
I gave the indication that nothing of Lovecraft has been adapted before. You look him up. There are 216 credits of him as the writer.
Wow.
Yet I can't. Apparently, he wrote Reanimator. That's the only one I've actually heard of.
Wow.
But I've already found the writer's credit of his that I want to see, and he's only got a credit of inspired by the works of. But the film is 2014's Call Girl of Cthulhu. That sounds fucking awesome.
Awesome.
I will see if I can find that one. Anyway, so that's Lovecraft Country. Look, it looks good. The acting's great for the most part. And as I said, the first episode had some amazing moments of absolute sheer tension, and was reminiscent of the kind of thing it did kind of feel like in parts a little bit like Get Out. So it had that kind of genius in there, but they took a backward step in the second episode.
It seems to be that there seems to be a certain kind of narrative that starts really well, and then they go, okay, we're going to strand you in this one location for a while, and it always seems to suffer. And you said it from episode 1 to episode 2 of Lovecraft Country. I'm thinking season 1 to, I think it was season 2 of The Walking Dead, where they were at the farm for most of it, and everyone got really frustrated. It seems to be like, sort of like, okay, know the story you're telling. You don't think of like the original Terminator. That's a chase movie, and if they suddenly sit down and they do nothing for a while, that's when the pace comes off. And the only time they really did that is to have a moment where they could have a sex scene just so that they create the savior for the future.
Yeah, pretty much. it's I'm all good. It's a bit like when you go see a band, right? If you go see a band do a gig, remember when bands used to play gigs?
Yeah, I remember Nickelback quite clearly.
Yeah, if you're Nickelback, you're probably not going to start with "This Is How You Remind Me," right? Your best, most famous song. I don't know any of their other songs. You're probably going to start with something people know. So, for example, I remember I saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 2016 in Manchester. And they started out with "Don't Stop," which is a well-known song of Californication or one of the others that came out after that. I can't remember. But it's a good song. It's well-known, and the people were jumping up and down and bopping, and definitely a great way to start the show. The next 5 songs were all off their new album, which nobody had because nobody listens to their albums anymore because they're terrible. And you're like, I don't want to hear shit off your new record. Okay, drop 1 or 2 in. You've got an incredible back catalogue of amazing music. Why am I listening to shit off your new record? I don't want it. So we actually left. But that's exactly what Lovecraft Country's done. It's given us a beloved classic hit to open the gig and then drop 5 songs off their shit-ass new album.
Yeah.
And then you can pull it back, though, when you've got a back catalogue like the Chili Peppers do. Yeah. I don't know that Lovecraft does have that back catalogue, but we'll see.
It'd be interesting to see because I am very curious about it. I do love a lot of the ideas that come from Lovecraft stuff. And
also, I remember there's a John Carter of Mars reference.
Awesome. Always going to be happy about that. Now, the movie that I want to talk about has got very little going for it, unfortunately. And that is the Vin Diesel vehicle Bloodshot.
It didn't look good.
This is a bit of a hot mess, and there's only really 2 reasons why I decided to go and watch it, because I am a fan of Guy Pearce, and because I'm a fan of Toby Kebbell, who has a small cameo in this movie. This is an adaptation of a graphic novel about Ray Garrison, a slain soldier who is reanimated with superpowers. But he's not actually reanimated with superpowers. He's just given basically cybernetics and not actual superpowers. He's just a very powerful machine. So kind of flirting with an odd thing here. I remember the early kind of during production buzz of this movie was like, oh, this is going to be a gritty, more adult orientated superhero style movie, and it's really not. It's dumb, and it is not particularly entertaining dumb either. It's directed by Dave Wilson, who has primarily only really done sort of like visual effects stuff. The only other thing that he did was he did direct an episode of Love, Death and Robots, and it was Sonny's Edge, which is first episode apparently, which it was pretty good. But I think the primary blame for this movie lies with the writer, who is Jeff Wadlow. Jeff Wadlow, who was once cited by Quentin Tarantino as being one of 2013's best films for Kick-Ass 2, which is not a good film. He also has...
We read Fantasy Island. I heard that was really bad.
Yeah, that was not good. He did write an episode of The Strain, but that had very up and down. He wrote True Memoirs of an International Assassin, and when you have Kevin James involved, of course you're talking about quality. He's done a few odds and sods of bits throughout his career, but nothing particularly stands out to me, and none of this movie has any point to it. There's no heart to it. The action sequences are shoddy. The VFX, mildly okay. None of the characters are given any kind of time or desire to know more. You do not feel like, yeah, I want to know more about that character or that character. It's stereotypes upon stereotypes, butting heads of testosterone bullshit, and it's trash. And they were very lucky that the quarantine hit, because it came out into cinemas, I believe, did not do well, but this was right on the cusp of the world locking down, and it's gone to like streaming services and things like that, where it'll have a general success, I think, because it's a dumb action movie, and those are big money on streaming services, really.
And it's got a big name in it. You're going to go, oh, if this is the same thing we've talked about many times, it's like in the old days when you go to the cinema, people oftentimes wouldn't make up a decision about what they're going to see till they get there. And that's the old thing we say, like, you go there with your date, there's a 90-minute Vin Diesel film, or a 2.5-hour sequel to something made 30 years ago. Blade Runner 2049. You're going to see the Vin Diesel film. Who are you kidding? So I think the same thing play in streaming, right? You don't turn the streaming service on going, I'm going to watch blah. You're going to go, I'm going to try, there's a new Vin Diesel film out. Let's watch that.
Yeah, absolutely true. But it's also overlong. It's an hour and 49 minutes, and you feel those minutes. There's a lot of good intentions, I think, going into this movie. Like, there's some possibly interesting ideas, but none of the production team have the quality, seem to have the quality to actually pull it together into a cohesive, interesting action sequence or concept, let alone a full movie. It's a real shame to see Guy Pearce in here, frankly, because he is a far better actor than this movie requires. And he seems to be making interesting, unusual choices in his career. Like the last movie of particular note that he was in.
Iron Man 3?
Well, I liked him in that for sure. He also played Peter Wayland in Alien Covenant.
Oh, that sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was Domino? It's not. I assume that's not the Keira Knightley film. No, it's not.
No. He's been doing Jack Irish stuff for a while.
That's Australian, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Rover is apparently good.
He is based in Australia, though, right? Like, and we have a friend who used to do recording for him. He's a musician as well.
Oh yeah.
And he has a home studio here in Melbourne and stuff. So I feel like, I mean, Guy doesn't necessarily. I have a feeling he doesn't work overseas a whole lot.
Maybe.
And probably a little bit picky about what he does. So I mean, that the fact he's in Bloodshot probably doesn't stand up to the fact he's being a bit picky. But you know what? Sometimes you just want to get paid.
Yeah, but there's moments in this movie that are actually interesting, and if they'd kind of stuck with that style, like the cameo that they have of Toby Kebbell's character, it's ridiculous. The whole thing, it is absurd, and they even bring reference to it in the movie because, spoilers, they fuck with Vin Diesel's memory and implant things into it, and there's someone who is literally making up this shit. But the style and the way that they film it's like, okay, if you'd gone with that style for the whole movie, that would have been at least entertaining. But they don't, and it's like, oh, really? They're even going to chastise that style in their own movie and replace it with something far more boring? Come on. Know your product. It's such a shame. And, you know, this is a typical Vin Diesel role as well. He's a tough guy with no brains. And Vin Diesel is actually smart, but he seems to relish playing these dumb, strong guys that have real heart and absolutely devoted to his wife or his loved one and will do anything to get back to her. Like, yeah, we've seen that in The Fast and the fucking Furious. Do something else, Vin. Do something else, please.
Well, he's got two Fast. He got a Fast and the Furious and the Guardians of the Galaxy and an Avatar film in his coming films, apparently, and F9, which is Fast and Furious. So two different Fast and Furious films. I mean, I guess if you're going to get paid for doing the same thing again and again,
that's true.
I was actually looking at a Vin Diesel film the other day. I was actually watching a clip of one. That was a long story about why. And if you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, he did have such promise.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at Saving Private Ryan, his character wasn't
Mm-hmm.
had of a big role, but he was memorable.
Mm.
You
Boiler
look at
Room.
Boiler Room was the one I was talking about. He plays again a smallish role, but incredibly memorable in, I think, a massively underrated film.
Oh, it's great.
And he's really, really. I mean, I feel like he was one of those actors that you got more interested in what was going on when he was on screen.
Yeah.
Because of how he played his character, he was an eminently watchable actor and character, and like the fact that he had such promise at the time and has gone on to do well. I mean, look, he's a big star, I guess.
Yeah.
So little of interest is what I think I'm saying. He's done so little of interest since then, and you sort of say he's slipped into basically this cliche of being making mediocre action films that make $1 billion because people are bored.
He's kind of a more financially successful version of what Sylvester Stallone was like back in the 80s and 90s.
He's the upgraded version of Jared Butler. That's what he is.
Yeah, kind of. And I would just like to see Vin do something to really sink his teeth into. Hell, even put him as the updated sergeant in the remake of The Interview that we've been pitching.
That could work. I think you need to bring his an A game we haven't seen in many, many years.
In a long time. But he could do it. He could potentially do it. But yeah, it's just a real disappointment, because in a tidal wave of superhero and enhanced / augmented super people movies, this literally doesn't even try to do something new, and it's a real shame. It's a real shame, because there is some talent involved here. This is borderline Uwe Boll territory.
Wow, that's a huge statement.
Yeah. But that's all I have to say on that.
Well, I had seen it floating around and it looked awful, and I'm happy to keep giving it a miss.
Yep. Now, should we go to our final topic of discussion?
Let's.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've teased it for a few weeks in a row, but finally Travis has played a little bit. We are going to be talking about the Xbox Game Pass exclusive Grounded.
Super early access.
Yeah, super early access. It's for the uninitiated. You can play it solo, you can play as a party, and you are a group of people who have been miniaturized and are lost in the garden, and you must survive. It's a crafting and survival game. Very much living out your Honey, I Shrunk the Kids dream.
Fantasy. It's surprising that no one's come up with this idea and tried it before.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. But interestingly, I did see there was an interesting alternative that seems to be coming out from an independent company, especially for Nintendo Switch. But I think it's coming to other platforms as well. I can't remember the name of it though. So suddenly they've gone, oh, you know what's popular? Let's go back to 1990.
Now, as we said, this is in early access, so it's a way off from being finished. This is a crafting survival game, so it's a little bit like every crafting survival game you've ever played. So you have to quickly gather resources. Your first few quests are involved in building tools and weapons and clothing or armor, for want of a better term, to survive. And then you need to start solving some puzzles in order to sort of progress the very limited amount of story and offer along.
Yeah.
I should be upfront of this. I've seen a lot of people who've said this is really good and they really liked it. I was bored. I've played a lot of crafting survival games over the years. This felt like crafting survival game number 621. Yes, the setting is a little different to most, but it didn't really differentiate itself enough for me to feel any way particularly original. It's super weird that Obsidian made this. This is way outside their comfort zone.
Well, it seems like this is for those who might not know, Obsidian. They kind of got famous, I guess, for did they do New Vegas?
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah, so Fallout New Vegas, which garnered a lot of praise, and they have since become one of Microsoft Game Studios' in-house teams, and they are working on some, I guess you could call them Elder Scrolls killers for the next generation, which it seemed to be a long way off by the sounds of it, but they definitely have their strong roots in those classic RPGs, particularly Western style RPG games. So having this, it seems like it's probably a small little team, almost like a passion project for them. Coming out with this, it's a curious thing.
It's a thing from. I should also note they did a little game called Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, which
but no one played those.
No one played them. They're not memorable at all.
No.
But yeah, so to go into making a survival crafting game is very much, they're famous for their story-driven stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the final product will be story-driven. We don't know. There's a little bit of story here, but it's very, very limited. Yeah, I gotta say, I just thought it was utterly generic. I got through, made my tools and beat the shit out of some ants and shit. There was a puzzle to be solved about redirecting lasers, which I managed to figure out, which is quite surprising considering how bad I am at puzzles. And then you sort of, the game does direct you to an underground science lab that your uncle or something owned or built. Mm-hmm. And you to be like attacked by a fucking robot, which I died twice trying to beat. And then it was kind of like, yay, you beat the robot. Build stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of where the narrative element of the story kind of stops for the time being. They are doing quite a lot of updates to it, but I kind of agree with you in that it's somewhat generic. It's almost like kind of like Baby's first world builder game, but if Baby was 25 years old and didn't want to play with Pokemon. It's very, very simple, and I appreciate the simplicity of it, but I don't think we can be too critical of it because it is still very early access, and they are doing I think considering how early this game feels, the stability of the game seems pretty good. It looks generally pretty good. It plays fine. If you've played any first-person shooter kind of game, you'll be able to pick this up pretty easily. I think this is very easy to for people to access and start playing. There's just not a lot of stuff in there to do at this stage.
I think that was my objection. It's kind of like, hey, build a base. I'm like, where? With what? I mean, like, it didn't really seem like a whole lot of places to build bases with. And yeah, I won't disagree with any about it. It's stable. It does look fine. The art style it feels like it's aimed at a younger audience.
Yeah.
But then, there are spiders in the game.
They're fucking terrifying.
They are terrifying because they are huge. And they look it was realistic, though. It's the first time I've ever seen an arachnophobia setting in a game before. So if you have arachnophobia, you can turn it on, and you can actually basically turn them into big blobs. But yeah, you see. I mean, kudos to the developers for that because they've succeeded in that sense. That seeing a spider for the first time, you're like, "Fuck!" And they're basically everything you would imagine a giant spider to be. They basically one shot you, which is fucking annoying. And they just come along and destroy your base, no worries at all. But that doesn't quite click with the idea of it being for kids when you've got terrifying giant spider monsters in it. You're like, so that was a little bit confusing. I was sort of thinking this is for kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's accessible. It looks fine. Plays fine. And like I said, I'm the outlier on this one because I've seen a number of reviewers who I'm a big fan of and I have a lot of respect for come out and say that they really, really enjoyed it. So it's, as you say, if you've got Game Pass, you might as well, if you like a survival crafting type game, you might as well check it out and have a look at it. You might find that, unlike me, you get quite a bit out of it, and especially if you're the kind of person who's good at making their own fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this, in some ways, it's almost like the Honey, I Shrunk Your Kids game version of Sea of Thieves. When that first launched, you could make a lot of fun if you got your own crew together and you had a fun crew to do things with. And I think that that's probably quite true for this game. But much like Sea of Thieves, there wasn't enough in there to kind of inspire you on as you went through, just story-based ways. So I think that going into as the game develops, as we get into Xbox Series X and whatever the future may hold for all of that stuff, I think there's a lot of potential in this game to be something of interest. But for now, I don't think you're necessarily missing out if you don't join now. But if you've got time, if you want a game that you can play with your younger audience, generally speaking, if you don't mind the kind of going back to the PG movie era of some of those ones that genuinely had some scary moments in them, but overall, so like, yeah, that's okay. You're probably going to have some good fun with this, I think.
Potentially. I'll be very curious to see. I'll be definitely interested to take a look at it when we see the final product.
Yeah.
Could be quite some time away, but it's a solid start.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's probably not going to be for me, though. I've recently picked up a game called 7 Days to Die, which is a zombie-based survival crafting type game.
Well, that's a totally new era of gaming and styles for you, isn't it, Travis?
It is. Well, no, it's certainly not well known for liking zombie things, but it's been out for a few years and it's still in early access as well. So, but that's a lot more fun to me in the sense that the actual subject matter feels a little bit more my jam. But where I never really wanted to play a game based on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But but that said, though, it's 7 Days to Die is by no means as polished as Grounded. So if you're looking for a really great polished version of something like that, have a look at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, either live or later on when we get released on podcast services on Friday evening or Saturday when I get around to doing it. This episode, we reviewed the 1998 Hugo Weaving starring The Interview. Travis talked about Lovecraft Country. I talked about Bloodshot, and we shared our thoughts on the early access of Grounded. Next week, I am taking over the reins for the Chain Movie Sessions, going to Gallipoli, directed by Peter Weir, starring a young Mel Gibson. And we will have a couple of other movies, TV shows, or games that we will have consumed in the next week to talk about as well. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.